Alright, before we start this video, I would like to say that I spent a lot of time on this, so I would appreciate it if you go and read the one-shot. The link's in the description, go read it, and I would appreciate it super duper big time if you subscribed. Go read it, and then come back and finish the video. I know I'm giving you a homework, but I would really like to know what other people think of what I made, how people interpret it, because there was stuff I intended and I don't know if it's like readable as such. So go read it, and now we can start. Okay, so I want to split this video into two parts. One for art, one for story. We'll start with art. Oh, dude, that rhymes. So I am really proud of the work because I was working like 50 hours a week for 3 weeks straight, and that's a lot. Like maybe someone here watching works like 60 to 70 hours weeks, but I don't. I actually don't work weeks at all normally because I'm not employed, because I'm Gen Z. So jumping from doing almost nothing every day to drawing 6 to 8 hours, 68 hours, 6 to 8 hours every day was a lot. I am proud of everything I've done, but I'm not happy with it. That feels weird to say, but I feel like there's a few things that I feel like I did kind of wrong, but I committed so hard to it in the early pages to where I didn't feel like I could just change it. So early in the process, I was getting tired really fast, but I think that was just my body getting used to working so much every day, because after maybe 4 or 5 days, I started to really get into the flow of everything, and I actually felt really fulfilled. Crazy, following your passions makes you feel fulfilled. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm really happy I did it, even if I'm not happy about everything I did. Specifically about the art, though, I was just kind of trying stuff. You know, I wanted to do slightly thinner lines than normal, because, well, I feel like, I explained it in my last video, but, you know, I can say it again here. I prefer lines that are a little more loose, so I would rather have 2 lines that connect rather than one thick line. You know, like I like some weight variance. Another thing I tried, it's not my first time doing this. Actually, I don't think it's my first time doing this. I don't know. I really enjoy hatching for all the scenes on the field with like the really bright lights and stuff. I just find it really fun. I don't know what it is. I maybe because it's like really easy to make something look good doing that, but I also just find the process of hatching fun. Although I do wish I used hatching to shade everywhere. Like you could say it works in the narrative where like the real world has screen tone shading, and then the baseball game has hatching, but like that's not what I intended. It's just kind of how things turned out. Yeah, I did cut a few corners when it comes to like shading with screen tones, which I'm not even gonna start with Photoshop screen tones. Oh my god, horrible. They're horrible. They suck so much, but we're not gonna get into that. I also reused a lot of panels that you probably noticed when reading it. I'm not gonna say it's like bad to reuse panels. I just feel like I did it a lot. Because there's a few different things, right? Where, for one, I wanted to spare myself from struggling to make something new every panel and then probably just burning out in like page 30 something, because bones are difficult. That's not what we're talking about right now. But 2, I sort of struggled to stay on model. Sometimes I would copy and paste a panel and then trace over it, which is technically not copy and pasting, but it kind of is. But yeah, I mean, near the end, I started to get more consistent with Frog's face, but it's like the last 10 pages, 10 to 20, the latter half of the story, I was able to stay on model with Frog's face. I also, when reusing panels, it made me feel so bad every time I did, but at the same time, I knew I wouldn't be able to draw a new panel every single, panel. So I would reuse stuff, and it also goes back to the sketch, because while I was sketching everything, a lot of stuff ended up being like close-ups of people's faces, and I feel like I didn't zoom out enough, so that does make me a little disappointed. But at the same time, I understand that a lot of people reuse panels, and I shouldn't be expected to have everything be completely different, because that just adds a ton of difficulty to it. Now, another big part for me is, I don't know where to start with this. I really like cinematography. I'm a big fan of like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul for their cinematography. I like the way Vince Gilligan will just let the camera stay put and have like a minute-long shot. We'll have the characters move around and stuff in the shot. And I was going for a more cinematic approach here. So there's like a few pages that are just one panel repeated and frog or skull move within that shot. The first one's pretty interesting because the page is like progressing in the background, and then it becomes part of the conversation where like they're talking and then they get cut off by that guy, and it's important. And I think that's a good example of what I wanted to do. It just makes it more grounded, I guess. And that's kind of what I was going for. So going forward, I do kind of want that to be part of my style, because it's just something I really like. Because here's a little history for you. I used to have this big interest in filmmaking and directing and all that stuff. And then I kind of realized I would need like a whole team to make a movie, and I was like, oh, I don't know. Eventually, manga and comics and stuff, I kind of realized that it's just like storyboarding, but you have complete control of everything. There's like no need for anyone else to help necessarily. I do feel like that interest in film has sort of affected my style. In general, I feel like the art is alright. I don't want to just say alright, because if I just say, it's fine, I guess, everyone's gonna be like, it's fine, I guess. And honestly, it just kind of sounds like I'm asking for people to tell me it's good. I think it's good enough. Okay, that also feels like I don't have enough confidence in it. I am pretty happy with the art. Like, I'm proud of what I've done, but I will say the story is far better than the art. And then there's some panels, or maybe scenes as well, that I think do well with emotion. Like, I was trying to convey a lot of feelings in this one shot. Like, it's kind of packed with things going on beneath what I just say is happening, right? Because again, filmmaking, show don't tell, it's very important to me. That's kind of the reason I don't like thought bubbles, honestly, because it feels like an excuse for exposition rather than just, letting the reader figure out what's happening on their own. This page or this panel, it's packed with feeling, but I don't tell you what to feel. And it's super moody, and I might be biased here because I really don't want it to be, but I don't think it's necessarily edgy or like sad. Well, it's sad. This panel, oh my god, this panel is like, it makes him look so pitiful. It's more about, I don't know, I handled it in a way to where some of the art feels moody and sad, but it doesn't feel edgy or performative. It just feels sad, and I'm pretty proud of that. That's not something I can imagine everyone can do. And then there's a lot of things, like details, that would pop up into my head, kind of randomly. So I'm doing this all based off of memory, so there might be a little more that I am forgetting to mention. But that's up to you, the reader, to find. In the middle of drawing, the third page, I think, is when he goes to the bathroom. I don't know. There was nothing on the wall, and I wasn't really sure what to do, and it felt kind of annoying how empty the background was. So I was like, okay, what could I put there? Oh, I don't know, portraits of himself. That's really easy. And then I was like, hold on, it could be like an age, like different ages, and 3 little pictures in the background of a panel is able to say a lot, because when he was a baby, he had the frog suit on, and he had Skull following him. When he was a dorky kid, he was all whimsical and joyous, but he still had Skull, and he was still wearing the frog suit. And then he became an emo kid, still had Skull, all that. And it's like partially a joke. Well, it was a joke at first, and then I realized there's kind of more to it. He grew up with the Skull following him, and so that almost certainly impacted his life. That's not just like an emo kid in that picture, that's like a depressed teenager. And I think that's just kind of, I don't know, I think that says a lot. The second time Frog is watching TV, that's The Evil Dead, if you don't know. I mean, it's not like necessarily important to the narrative. I mean, I guess it could be. You could say like Evil Dead, Skull is death, right? Like Skull shows death, Evil Dead. You know, it's whatever. I just wanted to reference Evil Dead. You can find meaning in it if you want. Another detail for art is when Frog is being a little creepy with that woman, which we'll talk about that later. In that one panel where it's like top down, it's Frog kind of partially blocking the way out, physically blocking the way out, intimidation, right? But he's not big enough to block the entire thing. So what I decided to do was put the speech bubble to block the rest. And I just feel so smart for that. I think that's a good use of speech bubbles and stuff, where it's like, it has not just what he's saying is creepy, but where I put the speech bubble makes her feel even more trapped, because it's like what he's saying, his physical placement, all of it makes her trapped in this cubicle, and it's like a really uncomfortable scene. All right, it's time to talk about the story. It's very personal to me, so I do sort of worry how it's going to be received, but at the same time, I think it's important and also a little too late to turn back. I think it's important to talk about like the real feelings behind a creation, and then it's just a little uncomfortable, but it's probably worth it, and I'm safe from like real judgment because I have anonymity and none of my friends know about this channel. So there's no downside talking about like how I feel to the internet rather than to my friends. So for the story, I stuck to my strengths, character writing. I love writing and thinking about characters and coming up with that kind of stuff. I kind of suck at like plots because like it's just, I don't know, there's so much to make a good plot, but like making a good character feels a lot easier. So since the characters are so important, let's talk about them. Now obviously the only important ones are Frog and Skull. No one cares about the co-workers or the boss. They don't matter. So Frog is meant to be readable as bipolar. Now I'm not bipolar, but I do struggle with like a depressive cycle sort of, and so what I did basically was just like have the cycle, and then instead of feeling fine, we dip into mania. The whole metaphor for the baseball game is supposed to be, at least my intention, I don't know what other people will interpret, but running the bases is supposed to feel like mania. That's why everything's so bright. It's supposed to be like just overwhelming, and the dugout is supposed to be depression. So it's the contrast between the light and the dark. It's obvious. To me, as the one who wrote it, it's obvious. But the interesting thing is about home plate. So in my experience, before I dip back into depression, or if I am coming out of depression, I have this maybe one day of middle ground where I feel sort of numb, right? I feel not good, not bad. It's what I describe as the fuzz in the story, which is why he only feels it when at home plate. And then there's Skull. Skull, I, again, find it kind of obvious, but he's supposed to represent intrusive thoughts. Another thing that I personally deal with. Now, what I find so interesting about his character is how well I wrote him, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty proud of how everything worked out with him. So things start out, almost comedic. I don't actually find it funny, but it's really lighthearted. Like, don't forget to mouthwash. And then, the scene where Frog gets cut off on the road, Skull overreacts. Kill him, run him off the road, But it still feels comedic because of how much of an overreaction it is. It's not necessarily anything bad yet, but it kind of pushes it further into bad territory. So when Frog's co-worker says he got married, Skull, he says a slur. And that's the first time Skull pushes past the line. He was kind of like hanging back. But once he said that word, it wasn't funny anymore. There's no comedy behind it. He said that, and now Frog feels shame and guilt because, in a literal sense, he thought that word after knowing his coworker was gay, which unfortunately is a part of intrusive thoughts. But the important thing is, there is a big distinction between Frog and Skull. That's why they're two separate characters. So again, I don't like thought bubbles, so I don't want to just do like, oh, we can see his thoughts, and then it's like he wants to do bad things. No, because he doesn't want to do bad things. That's the important part. Skull, he's supposed to be like, not just intrusive thoughts, just negative thoughts in general that also have intrusive thoughts, because when he's depressive, Skull is like berating Frog and just making him feel terrible. But when he's manic, Skull is egging him on. He's like, yeah, let's go do this and this and this, and just keeps saying bad things. You know, his gradual escalation, like, it wasn't necessarily intentional as I was writing it, but after I realized it, I started to lean more into it, where originally I just wanted to cover the different bases of like what it feels like to have intrusive thought. You know, sometimes they're like kind of light, maybe almost even funny, and just like overreactions. But sometimes they're just things that you feel guilty for even thinking. There's a lot of shame that comes with that. But the most important thing is, if you don't do it, you probably didn't actually want to do it. So you're not necessarily a bad person for having intrusive thoughts, but intrusive thoughts can make you feel like you're a bad person. I hope I'm explaining it well enough. Later on in the story, with Skull's pushing boundaries and whatnot, by the time he mentions exiting the game, which is supposed to mean like suicide, right? It doesn't feel jarring at all, because we've already understood Skull to be sort of unpredictable and to kind of always make things worse. So whenever he pushes it further, it's not surprising. But the fact that Frog, so in the end, when Frog sort of assimilates himself with Skull, it's more about accepting that Skull is, yes, part of him, but not all of him. It's kind of, my therapist told me this one, that you are not your thoughts. And that's kind of the whole point of the story. It's that acceptance makes things more bearable. It doesn't fix them, but it makes them easier to control. So like when Frog accepts the cycle of baseball in this metaphor, which is supposed to be life, you know, his manic and depressive cycles, he doesn't escape. He decides to keep playing, but rather than dreading everything, he's able to accept and start healing. Again, I'm not bipolar, but my understanding of the disorder is that acceptance plays a huge role in healing. So I thought that would work with the story. So when Frog and Skull assimilate, that's the only time we see a thought bubble. And like I said before, I don't like thought bubbles, but this serves a narrative purpose. It is ultimately under Frog's control, and this is when he realizes that. Instead of Skull declaring, we should go, or like stuff like that, you know, or like go in there now, it's a question. Do you want to go? One that Frog answers. I just think that's really neat. So if there's a general theme of the story, it's that acceptance is extremely important, but it's not the end. It's actually probably the first step in healing, and it's really difficult, but it is essential. I'm pretty sure that's everything. I hope I explained it well. I did this all without a script, so it's kind of messy, but I think this story is definitely worth people's time. I won't say anything specific about the art, but I think it's written well, and that's kind of more important than the art being spectacular, because good art without good story would kind of be boring. I put a lot of feelings and effort into this one shot, so please subscribe. Go ahead and leave a like. If you comment anything, I would actually much prefer it to be your initial interpretations of my story. You know, I just want to know what people think of this. I want to know, like, if my message gets through, or if it's too, like, on the nose or too subtle, or if it's good or bad. I don't know. Because as an artist, I feel like I can't really judge my own work. So yeah, it's here now online for everyone else to judge, and hopefully it's good stuff. And I will see you next time. Bye.